They found him in the rain-mud cupboard, shaking, blind, standing next to a massive German shepherd with one eye. His fingers tangled in the dog's wet fur like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The boy was 7. The dog was bleeding from a metal trap clamped to his hind leg. And yet, the animal never moved, not even as his blood soaked into the earth. When searchers arrived with flashlights and panic in their voices, they expected tragedy. What they found was something else entirely, a bond so unbreakable, so unexpected, it would shake their small town to its core. And none of them had any idea who the dog was, or what secrets he carried. This isn't just a story about a boy and his dog. It's a story about how one retired canine abandoned, forgotten, and presumed dead would become the eyes, the shield, and the hero of a child who had never seen a sunrise. Whitaker had never seen anything not his mother's face, not the stars over their Virginia farmhouse, not even the dog who would later change his life. Born with congenital blindness, Mason's world was shaped by sound, smell, touch, and imagination. He memorized the creak of the third stair, the clink of his mother's coffee mug on the table, the way wind danced through trees like invisible music. At just 7 years old, he could navigate his small home with astonishing confidence. His tiny fingers would skim the walls, counting steps between the kitchen and his room. He moved with such rhythm that visitors sometimes forgot he was blind until they saw the white cane tapping gently in front of him. His mother, Sarah, had raised him alone since her husband died in a highway accident when Mason was 2. She was 34, strong-willed, but exhausted, working long hours as a veterinary tech at the Oak Ridge Animal Clinic. Her hands knew how to mend animals, but they also bore the burden of loss. The worry had etched deep into her face in recent years, especially as Mason's curiosity grew faster than her ability to contain it. "He's got his daddy's spirit," she'd say, when neighbors fretted about Mason exploring too far from the porch, wild heart and all. Living with them was James Whitaker, Mason's grandfather. At 68, the retired Army K-9 handler still stood as straight as a fence post. He was a man of few words, his expression carved from leather and war stories he never told. But when it came to Mason, the old soldier softened. "Animals sense things we don't," James often muttered, watching Mason navigate the world with nothing but touch and intuition. Especially dogs. They see with more than eyes. That spring, the hills of Oak Ridge bloomed early. Main Street was bustling with tourists heading to the trails. Life rolled on predictably until one Tuesday afternoon in April changed everything. It started with a substitute bus driver, Sarah's. Clinic had called her in for an emergency goat delivery, so James had stayed behind to wait for Mason's school bus. Only the driver, unfamiliar with the rural route, missed the Whitakers' stop. By the time he realized his mistake, he was 3 turns too far. "Sorry, kid," the man grunted. "You'll have to walk back. It's not far." It was far where sit. It was confusing. For a child who couldn't see, being turned around even once was like being dropped in a foreign land. Facing the wrong direction, Mason tapped his cane along the unfamiliar road shoulder. Then grass, then uneven earth, then silence. He'd veered off the road. That was when he heard it. A low whine, a soft shuffle of feet in the brush. His breath caught. "Hello," he called out, his voice trembling. "Is someone there?" Something warm nudged his hand-a-wet nose, coarse fur. A large dog, its breathing steady, pressed its body beside him. "You lost too, boy," Mason whispered. The dog didn't bark. It simply tugged gently at Mason's jacket sleeve with its teeth just enough to urge, not frighten. Mason hesitated, then followed. One hand gripped the dog's thick fur, the other swept his cane in rhythm. The dog moved slowly, stopping when Mason stumbled, guiding him like it somehow knew the clearest route home. 30 minutes later, Mason heard the crunch of gravel beneath his feet. His driveway, the porch steps, the front door banged open. Sarah cried, sprinting out in her vet scrubs. She fell to her knees, scooping him into her arms. "Where were you?" they called. They said. "I got lost," Mason said calmly. "But the dog found me." She blinked. "What dog?" Mason turned toward the animal at his side. Only then did Sarah notice the massive German shepherd sitting calmly beside Hemmett's coat soaked, its right eye socket scarred and empty. "Oh my God, ... she whispered. James stepped out behind her. One look, and his entire body stiffened. "Where'd that dog come from?" "He saved me, Grandpa," Mason said softly, still clutching the dog's fur. James's voice was hard. "Probably just smelled your lunch. Can we feed him, please?" Sarah hesitated. The dog looked rough underweight, battle-worn, but he sat with the discipline of a soldier. "Just one meal," she said. "Then I'll call around too. See who's missing a German Shepherd." But no one was. The next morning, Dr. Martinez at the clinic examined the dog. "He's about 5 years old," she said. "The eye injury is old, well-healed, no microchip, no collar. But this dog, he's trained, very trained. Someone spent a lot of time with him." Sarah watched through the glass as Mason sat in the waiting room, the dog's massive body curled protectively at his feet. "He brought my son home," she said quietly. He knew Mason needed help. "Some dogs just know," Dr. Martinez replied, "especially shepherds. They're brilliant, sensitive." That night, they gave the dog an old blanket and a shelter in the backyard. But by morning, he'd moved. Opened the door to find him lying on the welcome mat. "That animal's got his mind set on something," he muttered. "Seen it before, in war dogs. Once they pick their post, wild horses can't pull them away. Mason named him Hunter because he hunts for me when I'm lost." The name stuck. Even James, though he only ever called him the dog, started watching him closely. There was something in Hunter's posture, the way he scanned the road, the way he placed his body between Mason and anything unfamiliar. It wasn't instinct, it was training, and it wasn't just the Whitakers who noticed. 3 days later, Greg Peterson's slick suit, shiny SUV, and a handshake nobody trusted showed up on their property. Peterson was the local developer trying to buy up half of Oak Ridge, to build luxury condos. "That's the dog," he barked, pointing at Hunter, "the stray that's been terrorizing my workers." "Animal Control's been looking for him. He hasn't terrorized anyone," Sarah said calmly, stepping in front of Mason. "He's been gentle, protective." Peterson narrowed his eyes. "At the dog, he's dangerous. Look at that face. That's not a pet's a liability." Hunter didn't growl, didn't bark, but his ears stood alert, his single amber eye fixed on Peterson's every move. Mason, his hand resting on the dog's head, spoke up clearly. "His name is Hunter, and he's not a stray. He's mine." If this story has touched your heart, even just a little, don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals. We bring you true emotional stories of animals who save lives, change destinies, and remind us what loyalty truly looks like. As Peterson left, James stepped closer to the dog and spoke to him for the first time. "You stirred up trouble, didn't you?" he muttered, eyes narrowing. "Question is, ... what kind?" But James had no idea just how deep the trouble went or how far back. Hunter's story reached because this wasn't just a lost dog, and something or someone was watching. In the days that followed, Mason and Hunter became inseparable. The big one-eyed German Shepherd seemed to shadow the boys every step always 3 feet behind, beside or in front, adjusting his pace instinctively to match Mason's rhythm. When Mason dropped his pencil at the dinner table, Hunter would nose it back into his hand. When the boy hesitated at a doorway, the dog nudged him gently forward. He didn't need commands. He just knew it was uncanny, beautiful, and for some, in Oak Ridge, unsettling. "Dogs like that don't just show up," James muttered one morning over black coffee and eggs. "He's no backyard stray. That animal's been through something. I can see it in his stance." "You think?" "He's a former military dog." James didn't answer at first. He just stared out the kitchen window where Hunter sat motionless on the porch, his eye locked on the road. "I don't know, but I've seen that look before. Overseas, that dog isn't guarding our house, ... he's guarding Mason." At school, things weren't as smooth. Mason's classmates didn't understand blindness, and even fewer of them understood the quiet, intimidating German Shepherd waiting for him at the bottom of the steps every afternoon. When boy Trevor, Wilson made it a point to pick on Mason during recess. He wasn't cruel in a loud, obvious way. It was subtler. Words just sharp enough to cut. "Bet that freak dog bit someone's face off." He said one day, "My dad says dogs with one eye are more dangerous. I heard he killed someone in a dogfight." Mason said nothing. He just sat by the fence, running his fingers across the braille pages of his book. He wasn't a fighter. But inside, something began to harden. That afternoon, something happened. That changed James's opinion forever. It was Thursday. Sarah had picked up an extra shift at the clinic. James had dozed off in his recliner with the ball game on low, while Mason sat outside on the porch steps reading aloud from Charlotte's Web. Hunter lay next to him, ears twitching now and then, his body relaxed but alert. Then came the screech of tires. A beat-up red pickup tore around the curve far too fast. The driver, teenage boy with his face glued to his phone, never saw Mason. The truck swerved, tires kicking up gravel, and veered right onto the shoulder straight toward the front mailbox. Mason, hearing the engine, instinctively stood in a blur. Hunter surged forward, clamping his jaws on the back of Mason's shirt and yanking him down the steps, dragging the boy backward just as the mailbox exploded into pieces. The truck corrected course and sped off without stopping. James bolted through the door just in time to see Mason on the grass, whispered, heart pounding. He knew that posture, that precision, that kind of timing. He knelt beside Mason. "You all right, buddy?" "I think so," Mason said, voice shaking. "I heard a crash. Did Hunter pull me?" James nodded, still watching the dog. He sure did. Just in time. That night, James told Sarah everything. "Sarah, that dog is no stray. The way he moved it was protection protocol. Like I trained in Afghanistan. I've seen bombs with less discipline." Sarah's face went pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying he's been trained, and not in some backyard obedience class. This is specialist-level stuff." Later, when Mason fell asleep on the rug with Hunter curled beside him, Sarah peeked into the room. The dog's good eye opened immediately, but he didn't growl or move. He simply stared. For the first time, James approached him slowly, crouching down. "Easy now," he murmured, palm extended. Hunter sniffed his fingers. "Well, I'll be damned." Sarah leaned over. "Try giving him a command," James whispered. "Say guard, see what happens." She hesitated. "Hunter, guard." The transformation was immediate. Head up, scanning the hallway with professional calm. "That's military," James said quietly, not even a question. The next morning, James made some calls to a friend at a retired canine handler group in Raleigh. Meanwhile, likely from the same injury that took his eye. She also found a faded tattoo inside his ear. "It matches the format used by military working dogs," she said softly. "So he belonged to someone," Sarah murmured. "Maybe not anymore," the vet replied. "If he was injured and retired, he could have been released for adoption." Mason had been quiet through the exam, but now he spoke. "Does that mean they'll take him away?" Dr. Martinez crouched down. "If Hunter isn't government property anymore, he can stay with you, but we'll need to find out more." As they left the clinic, Sarah's phone buzzed. "James, he's here again," he growled. "Peterson." Later that day, Sarah confronted him. "Is there a reason you're parked near my driveway?" Greg Peterson stepped out of his vehicle slowly, just enjoying the view. "Beautiful property. Be a shame if something happened to it." "Cut the games, Greg. What do you want with the dog?" "I want what's safe for the community." "You're harboring a dangerous animal, Sarah." "No, I'm protecting my son, and that dog saved him." Peterson's tone turned colder. "You don't know what that dog's done, but you do," she snapped. "How, exactly?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Without another word, he got back in his SUV and drove off. James joined her on the porch. "That man's hiding something." "No doubt," Sarah said, "and it's got something to do with Hunter." The next day, James got a call back from his contact. There was a program, he said, called Sentinel, designed to train dogs for protection and emotional guidance for children with disabilities in dangerous regions. Like Mason, Sarah whispered, only 12 dogs were ever in that unit. 3 were shepherds. All of them were reported dead after a fire at the training facility 2 years ago. But Hunter's alive. According to my guy, some of them suspected 1 or 2 dogs survived, but the program was shut down. It fits. The timing, the injury, the training. Sarah stared at the dog lying beside her son. If he's a sentinel dog, why was Peterson so afraid of him? James looked toward the window. The full truth was still buried, but something about Peterson's reaction, the veiled threats, the quiet watching, the urgency told Sarah that Hunter wasn't just a forgotten soldier. He was evidence, and someone wanted him gone. The truck incident and the microchip discovery. Hunter was allowed to sleep indoors for the first time. Sarah had laid out old blankets in the living room, expecting him to stay near the fireplace. But when she checked on Mason at midnight, the dog was curled across the boy's bedroom, threshold head tilted to face both the window and the hallway, as if guarding against intruders no one could see. "You really are watching over him," she whispered. Hunter's tail thumped softly against the hardwood floor in response. That night, Sarah dreamt of fire, metal doors, muffled barks, men yelling, a dog trying to break through a locked gate, his eye bleeding and teeth bared. James confirmed her instincts. If he's one of the sentinel dogs, then he's been through hell. Those animals were trained for combat zones, for protecting military families. But they were also taught empathy, especially with kids who were vulnerable. Sarah's gaze fell to Mason and Hunter, playing on the front porch. The boy laughed. As he tossed a soft toy toward the edge of the steps, Hunter fetched it every time, careful not to bump Mason's cane. "That explains the way he moves," she murmured. "Like he's not just guarding, but reading Mason's mood." "They're exactly—" James nodded. "These dogs weren't just weapons. They were emotional lifelines. Problem is, that kind of training, it's worth a fortune." That complication arrived on Monday. Officer Mike Sullivan pulled into the Whitaker driveway with a clipboard in hand and a look of genuine regret on his face. "Morning, Sarah," he said, adjusting his duty belt. "Hate to be the bearer of bad news." "Let me guess," she replied, already bracing herself. "Greg Peterson." Sullivan nodded. "Filed an official complaint about a dangerous animal on your property. I've got orders to bring the dog." In for evaluation, Sarah's jaw clenched. "Mike, that dog saved my son from a truck last week. His claims push me into a corner. What if I get the proper paperwork? Licensing, vaccinations, behavioral assessment?" Sullivan exhaled slowly. "If you can get everything filed within 48 hours and the vet signs off, we might be able to put a hold on the seizure order." "I'll get it done," she promised. "But Mike, why is Peterson so obsessed with this dog?" Sullivan glanced around. "Off the record, he's been asking strange questions, like whether the dog has any markings. When I asked what kind, he dodged." Sarah's heart pounded, like a missing eye. He didn't say, "But yeah, I think he knows something." By 4 p.m. that same day, Sarah had Hunter back at the clinic. Dr. Martinez cleared her schedule to run a full workup. "Bring him in after hours," she said. "I've got a colleague who might help decode the microchip fragments," James insisted. On coming to, in case he reacts to commands, he explained these sentinel dogs responded to specific military cues. Might help keep him calm during scans. While Hunter was in the back, Mason sat quietly in the waiting room, running his fingers over his white cane. Through the exam room door, he could hear James's deep voice giving short commands. Steady, hold, stay. Hunter responded to each. One with quiet obedience, Dr. Martinez returned 30 minutes later, looking intrigued. "Okay," she said, pulling off her gloves. "He passed every behavioral test. And there's definitely an ID tattoo inside his left ear. The format matches U.S. military working dogs. It's faded, but I'm sending a photo to a former DoD vet in South Carolina, if anyone can trace it." Sarah nodded. "What about the microchip? Fragments are old and likely damaged from trauma. But if we can extract the serial number, we might be able to track his last handler." Mason had been quiet. Now he looked up. "Will? They take him away if they find out where he came from." Dr. Martinez crouched to his level. "Not if we act fast. If Hunter was discharged from service especially due to injury, he could be adopted out legally. We just need to establish the timeline." Back at home, Sarah spotted Peterson's SUV parked 2 houses down. The man wasn't subtle anymore. "James," she said, drawing the curtain. "He's watching again." The old soldier narrowed his eyes. "Been wondering why a man like that is so scared of one broken dog." "Think he knows who Hunter is?" James shrugged. "If he was involved with that facility, he might know." Exactly the following morning, Mason's teacher, Mrs. Parker, called Sarah in for a conference. "There was an incident at recess," the teacher explained gently. "A group of boys, led by Trevor Wilson, took Mason's cane and played keep away. He tried to get it back and fell." Sarah's fists clenched. "Is he okay?" "Physically, just a few scrapes, but emotionally, he was shaken. Trevor called him a freak, said even his dog was a freak. Sarah's stomach turned. "I'll talk to him," Mrs. Parker nodded. Mason's tough, but he's a little boy, and blind. It's hard enough fitting in without that kind of cruelty. That afternoon, Mason sat silently in the car, tracing the edge of his cane over and over. "Mrs. Parker told me what happened," Sarah said softly. "Do you want to talk about it?" He didn't answer right away. Then, in a small voice, Trevor said, "I was a freak, that no one wants to be friends with a blind kid, that even my dog is messed up." Sarah pulled over and turned to him, her voice firm. "Listen to me, Mason Whitaker. You are not a freak, and neither is Hunter. That boy is cruel because he doesn't understand what makes someone strong." "Why can't I be like everyone else?" Mason whispered. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "I wish I had an answer, honey, but maybe God gave you a different kind of strength, one most people never learn, and maybe that's why you and Hunter found each other." Mason considered this, then nodded. "Hunter doesn't care. That I can't see. I think he understands." "I think you're right." Later that night, Sarah sat on the porch with James. "Do you think Hunter could be officially certified as a service dog?" James rubbed his chin. "If he passed his training, and he clearly did, wouldn't be hard, especially if we can verify he was discharged. But that's the key. We need proof." "Marcus Johnson's coming tomorrow," Sarah said. "James, he's ex-Marine, handled K-9 South in Iraq. Said he'd take a look at Hunter." James nodded slowly. "Good. We need someone who speaks the same language." When Marcus Johnson arrived the next day, he stepped out of his truck with a military bearing that made even James straighten up. African-American, in his late 50s, with cropped gray hair and sharp eyes, he walked like a man who'd been through fire. "This the dog?" he asked, nodding toward Hunter, who had already positioned himself protectively between Mason and the newcomer. Marcus whistled softly. "That stance, definitely Sentinel. May I?" He crouched and extended a flat hand. "Sentinel, verify," he said clearly. Hunter responded, instant ears up to sharp barks, then returned to Mason's side. Marcus looked up, stunned. "Well, I'll be damned. This is S7. That mean Mason?" asked. Marcus smiled gently. "It means your dog is a legend. He was part of a top-tier program that was shut down after a facility fire. They said all the dogs died." Mason frowned. "So why is he here?" Marcus stood. "That's what we need to find out. But one thing's for sure. Not just your pet." He looked directly at Sarah. "He's the last living piece of a program someone tried very hard to erase." The sky was the color of steel the afternoon. Everything started to unravel. Sarah sat at the kitchen table surrounded by paperwork from the vet clinic vaccination records. Licensing forms, documents from Dr. Martinez confirming Hunter's behavioral evaluation. It should have made her feel safer, but it didn't. The air was heavy, humid, the kind of weather that makes your skin itch before the first drop falls. "They're calling for storms," James said, glancing at the TV where a weather warning scrolled across the bottom. "Flash flood risk." Sarah looked out the window. "Mason needs a break. He's been quiet since that mess at school. Maybe a little fishing trip will cheer him up," James grunted. "Just to the bend in the creek where I used to take his daddy. We'll be back before it gets bad." Hunter stood when Mason picked up his cane and tackle box. The German Shepherd never needed to be asked. His instincts were already aligned. When Mason moved, Hunter followed. Sarah watched them walk the trail down the property line, James holding the poles, Mason with one hand on the dog's back and the other sweeping his cane, and Hunter moving, steady as a compass needle. Something about the way the dog glanced back every few steps made Sarah's stomach twist. Back at the house, she poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee and tried to focus on the licensing forms. She'd just picked up her pen when the phone rang. It was Marcus Johnson, voice tight. "Sarah, is Mason with you?" "No, he's with James." "Why?" "Peterson just left his house in a hurry, loaded something into his SUV, and headed toward the state forest." "I don't like it. The forest backs up to our land. I'm on my way. Don't panic, but I think we need to find your son." Fast, Sarah was already moving, grabbing her keys and emergency flashlight. Rain had started to fall in fat, sporadic drops. She ran down the trail, calling out, "James, Mason." "No," answered just the hush of wind in the trees and the first low rumble of thunder. She reached the usual fishing spot, a gentle bend in the creek, where a fallen tree served as a bench, but it was empty. The tackle box lay open, line tangled, like they'd left in a hurry. Her heart thudded. James. Then she saw it, a piece of bright blue fabric caught on a thorn bush. Mason's shirt. She followed a second path narrower, unmarked, leading deeper into the woods. At the same time, Marcus pulled into the driveway to find it empty. He was dialing Sarah's number when Officer Sullivan's cruiser rolled in. "Everything all right, Mr. Johnson?" the officer asked, tipping his hat against the rain. "Not really. Mason and James are out in the woods. Storm's coming, and Greg Peterson may be out there too." Sullivan's professional demeanor sharpened. "Peterson. What's he got to do with this? I think he knows more about that dog than he's saying." "I'll radio the county search and rescue," Sullivan said, popping the trunk. "Grab what you need. I'm going with you." Meanwhile, in the deep woods, James and Mason were already lost. They'd spotted Peterson watching them earlier, standing across the creek, half hidden. James's military instincts had kicked in instantly. He packed up fast and led Mason on, a less traveled route toward home. But the forest was unfamiliar, and the weather turned fast. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to rattle James's balance. The trees blurred in sheets of rain, and the ground sloped dangerously toward a ravine. Hunter grew more agitated by the minute, trotting ahead, then circling back, nudging Mason with increasing urgency. "Should we follow him?" Mason asked. Before James could answer, they heard footsteps behind them, crunching deliberate. "Change of plans," James whispered. "We followed the dog. Stay close, son." They moved quickly, but the ground was slick. As they skirted the ravine's edge, James's foot slipped on wet leaves. He landed with a cry of pain, his ankle twisting hard. "Grandpa!" Mason cried, reaching for him. "I'm okay," James gritted, clearly not okay. Mason's lip trembled. "What do we do?" "You go with Hunter," James said. "No. Listen to me," James said, gripping Mason's hand. "That dog will get you home. I'll stay here where they can find me. But you've got to go." Hunter wind pressing against Mason's hand, James placed an emergency whistle into the boy's palm. "If you get scared, blow hard. Someone will hear you." With a final squeeze of his grandfather's hand, Mason nodded. "Okay." They'd only gone a few hundred yards when it happened. A voice cut through the rain. "Well, look who it is." Mason froze. He knew that voice. Greg Peterson stepped out from behind a tree, rain dripping from his jacket. "Out for a walk, blind boy." Mason backed away, clutching Hunter's fur. "My grandpa's hurt. I'm going for help." "That's so?" Peterson said, stepping closer. "I could give you a ride. My SUV's not far." Hunter growled low and deep. Peterson's eyes flicked to the dog, still protective, huh? After all this time, he was part of a program that cost millions. That fire wasn't supposed to leave survivors. But here he is, my little insurance problem. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a tranquilizer gun. "I didn't want to do this the hard way," he muttered. "But you leave me no choice. Get away from my son." Sarah burst through the trees, soaked to the skin, flashlight in one hand. Her other arm, shielding Mason. Peterson, froze, gun half-dash lowered. "Double quotes, Mrs. Whitaker," he said with mock cheer, just helping the boy find his way. "Save it, Sarah," snapped Marcus. "Told me you've been stalking us. Why are you so desperate to take this dog?" "He's not your dog," Peterson said. "He's government property." Sarah stepped forward. "The one that burned down." "A terrible accident," Peterson said flatly. "Insurance? Closed the case." Hunter maneuvered himself between Mason and Peterson, growling. Another bolt of lightning ripped the sky, and Peterson lunged. He fired, but Sarah shoved Mason aside, the dart grazing her arm. Peterson stumbled, lost his footing on the rain-slick ground, and went over the ravine's edge with a yell. Sarah rushed to the edge. He had landed on a rocky ledge about 15 feet down, unconscious, but breathing. "Mason," she said, turning. "Back? Are you okay?" "I think so," he whispered, "but Grandpa's hurt back that way." Voices echoed through the forest. "Sarah, Mason." She turned toward the sound. "We're over here, by the ravine." Seconds later, Marcus and Officer Sullivan appeared through the trees, soaked and out of breath. "Thank God," Marcus said. "Where's James?" "Back there," Sarah said, pointing. "Peterson's down in the ravine. He had a tranq gun." Sullivan's face hardened. "We'll radio it in, but we need to get to James now." Mason clung to Hunter, whispering in his ear, "You saved me." Again. Suddenly, Hunter stiffened ears up, tail rigid. Then he took off into the woods, barking in a sharp, repeated pattern. "Hunter!" Mason cried, reaching for him. Marcus froze. "Wait, that's a sentinel." "Alert, he's signaling." The barking led them to a shallow gully. There, half submerged in rising water, lay James conscious, but barely. Hunter stood over him, holding his head above the current. "Dad," Sarah shouted, slipping down the slope. James smiled weakly. "Took you long enough, Sullivan," and Marcus moved fast, lifting James carefully. His ankle was swollen and twisted, his face pale. But he was alive. "We need to move now," Marcus said. "Water's rising fast." As they carried James up the embankment, Sarah turned back. Hunter. But something was wrong. The dog wasn't following. He was looking at Mason, ears pinned back. And in that second, the ground gave way beneath the boy. Mason screamed as he slipped down the muddy bank toward the floodwater. Hunter leaped after him. Without hesitation, Mason tumbled down the muddy slope, his arms flailing, the world a blur of water, branches, and fear. He couldn't see the edge, couldn't hear anything but the thunder and his own panicked breath. The ground was slick and unsteady beneath his shoes, and in an instant he was sliding toward the rushing creek below. Then he stopped. Something had grabbed the back of his jacket and yanked him backward with a sharp jerk. Hunter. His front paws dug into the mud as he struggled to hold Mason back from the water. His muscles trembled from the strain, his breath hot and fast against the fabric. From the top of the ridge, Sarah screamed, "Mason, hold still!" Marcus was already descending, his boots slipping, one hand outstretched. Let Hunter do his job. Stay calm, buddy. His good eye never left Mason's face. Inch by inch, he fought against the pull of gravity and rushing water. They were just feet from safety when a loud crack split the air. A massive branch, weakened by wind and rain, came crashing down through the trees. Hunter had just enough time to shove Mason out of the way before the branch landed squarely across his back and hindquarters. The dog let out a yelp that cut through the storm like a knife. Marcus reached Mason first, pulling him up the last stretch of slope and into his arms. "I've got you," he said, cradling the boy close. "You're safe now." But Mason wasn't listening. "Hunter!" he cried, struggling in Marcus's grip. "Where's Hunter?" Sarah was already at the dog's side, skidding through the mud. Hunter lay partially pinned beneath the heavy branch, his body twisted awkwardly, his back leg at an angle that wasn't natural, blood mixed with mud beneath him. His eye met Sarah's as she knelt. "Oh God," she whispered. "Hold on, boy. Just hold on. I can't lift it alone," she shouted back to Marcus. He passed Mason to Sullivan and rushed to help. Together, they managed to shift the branch just enough for Hunter to drag himself free. But the damage was done. His back leg hung limp. He tried to stand, collapsed, tried again and whimpered. "He's not going to make it out on his own," Sarah said, her voice breaking. The water below was rising fast, and the slope was getting slicker by the second. Sullivan looked around, urgency in his voice. "We need to find higher ground. Fast." "I've got James," Marcus said, slinging the older man's arm over his shoulders. Sullivan picked up Mason. "Where's the dog?" "I'm not leaving him," Mason cried, reaching out. "I've got him," Sarah said. She was already wrapping her jacket into a makeshift sling to support Hunter's torso. But the dog had other ideas. Despite his shattered leg, Hunter struggled to his feet, refusing to let her carry him. He limped heavily, determined to walk. "You stubborn old thing," she muttered, half in awe. Hunter limped toward a narrow deer trail that veered uphill, pausing only to look back and bark once. Marcus's eyes widened. "He's leading us. That's a trained extraction signal." The path was steep, wet, and uneven, but they followed Hunter step by painful step. Sullivan held Mason. Marcus helped James. Sarah stayed near Hunter, speaking softly, encouraging him with every labored breath. Each time the dog faltered, he found strength somewhere deeper than instinct. Rain streamed down his muzzle. Blood dripped from his side. But still he climbed. "Come on, boy," Sarah whispered. "You've gotten us this far." After what felt like forever, they reached a narrow ridge, too steep to climb further, too narrow to rest. From somewhere above, they heard it, the rhythmic thwop of helicopter blades. Sullivan pointed skyward. "Rescue chopper. They can't land here," Marcus shouted. "No clearing. They can't see us," Sarah said. "But maybe." Hunter, panting, collapsed near the highest point of the ridge. Mason reached for him, his small hands resting on the dog's neck. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought us here." But Hunter wasn't done. Summoning the last of his strength, he lifted his head and began barking 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Morse code for SOS. Marcus's jaw dropped. That's Sentinel Distress Protocol. He's calling for extraction. The dog barked again, and again. His voice grew weaker, hoarser, but he wouldn't stop. The thudding of the helicopter grew louder. A spotlight flickered through the canopy above, then it hit them. A beam of light swept the ridge. Sullivan shouted, waving his flashlight. Hunter collapsed completely now, his eye fluttering closed, tail still thumping weakly against the ground. Mason crawled to him, arms wrapping around his massive neck. "You can rest now, boy," he whispered. "You don't have to be strong anymore." A rescue technician descended on a line, touching down with practiced precision. He scanned the scene and immediately called in backup. "We've got 2 critical elderly male, broken ankle. German. Shepherd, extensive trauma." "He goes up first." "No," Mason cried, clinging tighter. "Don't take him without me." Sarah gently peeled his hands away. "They need to help him now. Honey, we'll be right behind." Hunter was strapped into a rescue basket. As he was hoisted into the sky, his eye opened one last time, looking straight at Mason. Then he was gone. By the time Mason, James, and the others were airlifted out, the rain had slowed to a mist. Peterson had been recovered from the ravine hypothermic, concussed, but alive. The tranquilizer gun was recovered as evidence. He was cuffed and placed under police guard at the hospital. The town of Oak Ridge buzzed with whispers. Nobody had expected the kid who couldn't see and the one-eyed dog to survive that storm, let alone save each other. Hours later, Mason lay curled in a hospital blanket in the waiting room of Oak Ridge Memorial, his head on Sarah's lap. Across from them, James sat in a wheelchair, his leg in a cast. Marcus returned with 3 coffees. "Any news?" Sarah asked. "Just spoke with Dr. Martinez," he said quietly. "Shadows," he stopped, corrected himself. "Hunters. In surgery now, his leg's too damaged. They'll have to amputate." Mason stirred. "Will he live?" Sarah hesitated. "He made it through the worst part, but it's still not certain. Can I see him when he wakes up?" "Yes, baby," she said, brushing his hair as soon as he's ready. They were allowed in just before dawn. Hunter lay on a padded table in the veterinary recovery room, hooked up to 4 fluids and heart monitors. His right hind leg was gone, wrapped in clean gauze. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Mason approached first, guided by Sarah. His hand found Hunter's fur instantly. "Hey, boy," he whispered. "It's me. You were so brave. Now it's my turn to help you." Dr. Martinez smiled softly. "Talk to him. He knows your voice." Mason leaned close. "You're still my hero, even with 3 legs, even with 1 eye. You're still Hunter." Tail tapped once against the blanket. Sarah felt her throat tighten. "He heard you," she said. Just then, Officer Sullivan entered, expression tense. "We've got a situation," he said. "Peterson's awake, and he's talking." Sarah stood. "What's he saying?" "He's claiming the dog belongs to Meridian, defense military contractor. He's filing for seizure of government property." Mason clutched Hunter tighter. "They can't take him. They're sending someone over this morning," Sullivan added. "Legal inspection team." James wheeled closer to the group. "That man left me to die in a ravine. He doesn't get to decide anything." Marcus stood slowly, calm but firm. "Maybe we let them come. Maybe it's time the government sees what Hunter really is." The storm had passed, but the fight for Hunter's future had just begun. The government officials arrived. Just after 9 a.m. they were clean-cut, well-dressed men and women with Department of Defense credentials and hard eyes. The lead inspector, a serious-looking woman named Elaine Harper, wore a dark blue suit and introduced herself with polite firmness. "We're here to assess the situation regarding the German Shepherd known as Hunter. Based on the complaint filed, there may be legal grounds to recover him as military property." Sarah crossed her arms. "Hunter saved my son's life, twice. He's not property. He's family." Harper gave a sympathetic nod. "Mrs. Whitaker, I understand your emotions, but this dog may have been involved in a now-defunct military program. If so, we're obligated to conduct a full review." Marcus Johnson stepped forward, arms folded. "Then I suggest you look closely, because this dog isn't just a line item on some report. He's a veteran." He handed Harper a folder with photos, testimony, and Hunter's embedded tattoo codes. "Where did this come from?" "A friend inside the DoD archives," Marcus replied. Hunter's real designation was S7 to 117, part of the Sentinel program. That program was terminated in 2015 after a facility fire, Harper said, scanning the documents. "They claimed all dogs perished, but this dog survived, then someone tried to cover it up." Sarah leaned in. That someone was Greg Peterson. Harper looked up sharply. That name came up in other files. Internal Affairs is already looking into him. That afternoon, the review team requested to see Hunter in person. He was resting quietly in his recovery kennel, one leg bandaged, a small oxygen tube by his nose. When Mason entered the room, the dog's eye opened, and his tail thumped once weak, but steady. Harper knelt beside him. "He's injured. He's recovering," Mason said proudly. "He's stronger than anyone thinks." "Do you believe this dog knows you?" Mason nodded. "He's my eyes and my best friend." Harper studied the boy's face for a long moment, then stood. "I'll need to make a formal recommendation, but off the record. This dog doesn't belong in a lab or a cage. He belongs right here." 3 days later, a small ceremony was held on the Whitakers' front lawn. Officer Sullivan brought out the town's American flag. Dr. Martinez, wearing scrubs and a smile, stood beside Sarah and James. Mason waited in a fresh blue polo shirt, his cane tapping nervously at his side. A black SUV pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Elaine Harper this time, in a casual blazer, holding a folder marked classified, declassified for public. "Release." She approached the crowd and cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to report that the Department of Defense has concluded its investigation into the canine formerly designated S7 to 117, now known as Hunter." She turned to Mason and knelt beside him. "It's my honor to inform you that Hunter has been granted honorary discharge status, with full recognition as a retired military service dog. Effective immediately, he is released from all claims of government ownership and may be officially adopted by your family." Mason's face lit up. Harper continued. "Furthermore, due to his actions in protecting a minor, locating an injured civilian, and signaling for rescue, Hunter will receive a Medal of Valor for Canine Service, one of only 12 ever awarded in U.S. history." Cheers erupted. James saluted. Sarah wiped away tears. Mason held Hunter's leash tight in one hand and the metal box in the other. "I knew you were special," he whispered. Later, as the sun dipped low and the lawn cleared out, Marcus joined Sarah and James on the porch. "That boy and that dog," he said quietly, shaking his head. "They saved each other." Sarah sipped her lemonade. "I don't think we'll ever be the same after this," James chuckled. "Good, we needed a little shaking up." Just then Mason came outside with Hunter now, fitted with a sleek prosthetic for his missing leg. He moved slowly but with pride, like a soldier who knew his battle had been worth it. Hunter stopped near the porch and sat ears up, one eye on the horizon. Mason turned to his mom. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think Hunter can come to school with me now? Maybe as my guide dog?" Sarah smiled. "We'll call the district, but after what he's done, I doubt anyone will say no." The first day back at school was unforgettable. Mrs. Parker had arranged for a quiet entrance, but the moment Mason walked through the doors with Hunter beside him, tail-high prosthetic, clicking softly, every child turned to look. There was a long pause, then someone clapped and another, until the hallway was filled with cheering. Even Trevor Wilson, the bully who once called Mason a freak, stood back in silence as the boy passed him. Head high, his three-legged hero at his side, Mason didn't need to say anything. Hunter said it all just by being there. Months passed. Mason grew stronger, bolder. He joined a Braille reading club and started learning music. With Hunter always nearby, he navigated the world with confidence. Hunter, now fully healed, took on his new role with quiet dignity. Though his days of chasing intruders or fighting storms were behind him, he never stopped watching, always alert, always ready, and every night, without fail, he slept across Mason's doorway, just in case. One evening, as fall settled in and the air turned crisp, Mason and Sarah sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket. Hunter lay nearby, his head on his paws. "Mama," Mason asked softly, "do you think dogs go to heaven?" Sarah smiled. "I do, even military dogs, especially military dogs." Mason thought about that. "I think if they do, then they get to see the people they helped, all the way from up there." Sarah brushed a curl from his forehead. "And maybe, just maybe, they still protect them from above." Mason smiled and leaned his head against her shoulder. "I hope that's true." Thank you so much for following the incredible journey of Mason and Hunter. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel, Heroes for Animals, for more real and inspiring stories of courage, love, and second chances. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe animals can sense the people who need them the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, and never underestimate the power of a dog's love.